Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our enterprise meeting for September. It's again a pleasure to be with you virtually. I'll be at the enterprise meeting in Morden this morning, but delivering this message via video elsewhere. So the first thing I want to do is welcome all of you. Hope that things are going well. We are right in the middle of go time for us with harvest, so lots are on the go. It's busy in service and in parts, and a little bit of rain last week maybe will help things along. But we do want to still take time, 45 minutes this morning, to ensure that we touch base as enterprises, as a company. Even when it's busy, we want to ensure that we're giving information, we're gathering together as a community, as co-workers, so that we're in touch with what's happening in our business. So today I want to talk about 4 different items. The first one is just update you on a year-end accounting change. I want to give you an example of Farmers First. I want to review our mission, our vision, and our values, which we do almost every enterprise meeting. And I want to talk a little bit about teamwork, and more specifically our value of teamwork and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like, to give a little bit more definition to some of these concepts that we introduced at Green Day. But we want to continue to build on them to make them more of a reality and make them something that we're living out on a daily basis and not just a platitude that we talk about once a year. So to start, just a bit of an administrative adjustment. You'll hear about this, or maybe you already heard that we are changing our year end. And all that means from an accounting standpoint is that we used to cut off our books on 12 months at the end of September, and we're now moving that to the end of October. And so to do that, there's some accounting magic that needs to happen with Rod and Mike and the crew, but you don't really need to concern yourselves with that. But what it means is we're going to have our year end is going to be end of October rather than end of September, and we're doing that because that aligns with John Deere's fiscal year end. And it was always a bit of a difficulty comparing market share, sales, and other dollars to John Deere, because they always ran 1 month later than we did, so we were constantly making adjustments and trying to reconcile that. And so we've decided this year we're going to just change our year end, and that's what we're going to do. So if you've heard about that, there's really no big issue there whatsoever. It's really an accounting practice to try to align with John Deere. So the Farmers First example that I wanted to give, one of our core values, as you'll recall, is Farmers First. And this value is something that comes out of lots of things that we do. It's not something that we can just talk about or say that we do. We actually have to do things. And we do things, for example, by running extended hours during harvest season, our go time right now. And we do this by ensuring that our product specialists and our service reps and our salespeople and our parts people get out in the fields and are available to farmers right now when they really need us the most. And so those are things that we do. And we hope that it leads to some of the outcomes that farmers also see, that we put them, our customers, first in our priority list. And one of the things we were very pleased to hear is we heard through a third party, sort of independently verified, that things have been going well and that farmers are really pleased with the things that we are doing for them. And how did we hear about this? Well, Golden West Radio runs a program. Some of you have seen it on Pepin Valley Online or heard on the radio, where they have a program that calls Meals in the Field. And Meals in the Field is a event where Golden West Radio has farmers fill out an application to try to get a meal delivered to their farm during harvest. They do a draw, they select farmers, and then they go and interview them. They bring them pizza or other food, and they do an interview with them, a radio interview that's on the air. It's a nice way that Golden West supports farmers in our areas, and we're connected to Golden West. And they were telling us recently that they've been in all these different fields across southern Manitoba delivering the Meals in the Fields program, and they just were amazed by how pleased farmers were about the services that they get from Green Valley. And that's great to hear, because we weren't prompting them. It wasn't a survey that we sent out. We weren't coercing them into anything. All we did is we just heard from a third party who was in the fields with our farmers talking about how the farming season was going, and the farmers voluntarily talked about how appreciative they were of the things that all of you do during this busy time. In fact, the direct quote that we got from them is that farmers can't stop raving about GVE and our service and parts departments. And so that's great to hear that farmers are raving about us and they're doing it to others. And so please keep up the great work in all of our various departments: sales, service, parts, front desk, phones, reception, and everybody in between, because this is really an important validation of something that we want to live out. We want to do some things that really create this farmer first mentality that is shared or experienced by our important customers. So well done. So then I want to just talk about our mission, our vision, and our values. We know, as we keep talking about our mission, that we are. Our mission is that we are in the we're in a business of helping farmers, right? We're helping farmers feed a hungry world, and then we do it through a variety of ways. And in this graphic here, we had this at Green Day, but we help farmers so they can feed a hungry world by educating them, by equipping them with our high-end products. We help farmers with high-quality parts. We help farmers with precision agriculture advice. We service their machines. All of those things that we do in the various departments are so that they can feed a hungry world, and we can be part of that. And so this is a very important mission, but we also have to live that out in these 5 different areas that help do the things that help us live out our mission. Our vision, as we know, is we want to be the #1 dealer of the #1 brand in agriculture. We have that hashtag, it's on your mugs, and so we hope you keep thinking about it, but we want to be #1, and to be #1 dealer with John Deere means we have to excel in certain areas. I'm really pleased to talk to all of us today about the fact that John Deere is really recognized, John Deere Canada, that we've been really focusing on aftermarket, and that Darren and the team of service and parts managers, we've been writing out some metrics, we've been focusing on some key things, and it's been making a difference. And John Deere Canada has recognized that. They've seen that we've been putting more energy, more attention, more focus into aftermarket, and they're saying, way to go. They're reflecting back to us that they see that we are a leader in that area, and we're really putting attention into it. So I want to congratulate Darren and the whole team for doing things in the last 5-6 months that have caught the attention of John Deere and have had them say, hey, you're really a leader in this area, and that means we can confidently say we're working towards this vision of being the #1 dealer with the #1 brand in agriculture. So our values, remember that we had this sort of acronym that I've been using, FGHT. It rhymes, and it kind of helps you remember that those 4 key values that we focus in every month at Green Valley. They are farmers first, that's what the F is for. It's grounded, the G. It's horsepower. We talked about the last enterprise meeting. I shared a little bit more about what horsepower is and isn't, what it looks like for us. And lastly, the T is for teamwork. And so these are the 4 core values that we want to demonstrate, see examples of, encourage, and bring people on to Green Valley who live these values with us. And so today, I want to spend a little bit of time on teamwork. Teamwork is an easy word to say. It's not as easy to pull off day in, day out, week in, week out in what we do. Because what we do is difficult at times. It's not seamless. We have lots of moving parts, and we have to do a lot of things right. We talk about a relay between sales, service, parts of information to make sure that things flow. And all of these things in teamwork need to have some definition. And so this morning I want to give a little bit more meat to the bone, so to speak, in terms of what we're looking for in teamwork. And so we often talk in our values that teamwork is pulling in the same direction. And you'll recall at Green Day, Darren did a small presentation on teamwork, and he had that video of the wagon going up the hill. And there was one person who was really pulling well, and there was another person that was on the wheel, if you recall, and he was kind of, when things were going well and he was in the downswing, he was contributing, but when the wheel was going up, he wasn't contributing quite as much, so he was kind of on again, off again. Then we had that third person who was in the back, who was actually trying to slow down the wagon, was pulling on it intentionally or unintentionally. and we said, this is not the kind of person that we want helping us pull a wagon for Green Valley Equipment. And so that was one example of what teamwork looks like or doesn't look like. But I want to give you more definition to that today. And so really what I want teamwork, I want to use another acronym. I know we've got a variety of acronyms. We're not going to get too many this first year. We've had a few. But we want to keep talking about them so that we can live them and understand them. And so the teamwork acronym I want to talk about this morning is CREW. C-R-E-W. And CREW stands for civility, respect, engagement in the workplace. And this is a tool that's been used by some very large organizations, businesses, hospitals, other organizations in the last maybe 5 or 8 years with departments that have larger groups. And at GVE, we are 150 people. And so when one person thinks of teamwork, that may not be how another person thinks of teamwork. And so I want to give some real definition to what teamwork looks like. I've also been meeting with some departments, and will continue to meet with some departments over the next few months to personally talk about teamwork and CREW. How we can elevate civility, respect, and engagement so that our workplace can be more enjoyable, more productive, and include everybody so that everybody feels a part of GVE. And we do at times have people who feel a little on the sidelines or don't feel respected or don't feel like they really have a place here. And that we want to change because it's hard enough to find good staff, let alone keep them and keep them feeling engaged in the process. And engagement leads to lots of great outcomes, which we'll talk about. So CREW is this idea of civility. Now what's civility? Well, sometimes it's easier to define something by what it isn't. So let's look at the opposite of civility. So the opposite of civility is incivility. And incivility is actually a Latin term that means not a citizen. So it's like if you're not civil, you're not really part of something. You're actually removing yourself from society when you're incivil. And well, incivility looks like rude behavior. And we sometimes see rude behavior at work. It looks like discourteousness, doing something that's not very courteous of your fellow coworker or a manager or a customer. Those are do not bring civility to the workplace. Foul language. One of the fastest ways to not have civility in an organization or a household. Imagine if around your dining room table you had a bunch of your kids were around the dining room table and all of a sudden they started using foul language. You would not be thinking, boy, this is a civil conversation. This is the type of dinner that I was expecting. So foul language, even when we're upset, can harm civility. Inappropriate jokes or excessive sarcasm, biting sarcasm that crosses a line is not a sign of civility and can make people feel uncomfortable or can make people feel out of place. And the last thing that we want to do in a team that has great objectives to do, has important work to do, that mission that we talk about, is to have people feel left out or sidelined because of inappropriate jokes, inappropriate comments. Bullying is being talked about in the school setting, but boy, we even see bullying now in US politics, and I don't have to give tons of examples. Even if you're a Trump fan, there are some things that the Trump administration, just the whole way they go about working with staff and treating people that are either working with their organization or leaving, just doesn't show a lot of civility and really is degenerating into bullying by tweets or by comments on TV or the way things are done. And that's just not the way you want to run an organization. And being mistrustful. So incivility leads to mistrust, and mistrust leads to a lot of things that are not healthy in a workplace. Or confrontational. Some people are just confrontational or overly confrontational, and we want to minimize this as well. That doesn't say that we can't have strong dialogue or we can't have disagreement on things, but it's the approach that sort of matters. Or quarrelsome. Some people like to argue just for the sake of arguing. You maybe had a brother or a sister like that just like to argue for the sake of arguing. That can get very annoying if it's too much. A little bit occasionally around the lunchroom table to get some dialogue going, may have its place. But if it's quarrelsome and it's repetitive, that can lead to less civility than we want. And that causes poor teamwork, and poor teamwork reduces performance of the organization. And if we want to be the number one dealer of the number one brand, we want to minimize that sort of effect. So what is civility then? Well, civility is the things we might think about. It's being kind and calm and collected, even in the face of disagreement or mistakes. And let's face it, we are working in a complex business and mistakes happen. And while we don't want to accept mistakes, we don't want to let mistakes go, that would fall in the face of our other value, which is horsepower, where we're bringing the best people to the job. We do know that sometimes mistakes happen. And how we respond to those mistakes, or how we respond to things that didn't happen the way we'd like them to, really matters. And if we do it kindly and calmly and in a collected manner, we will get many more benefits from it, both for the person making the mistake and for the person trying to get a better outcome for the customer. So we want to do that. We want to be also, civility is being generous in praise and encouragement, even when there's a cost to doing that. What do we mean by that? Well, it's some people view it a net loss if they compliment somebody else, because somehow that might detract from their performance. Now that generally doesn't work that way in a business setting. We're not an academic institution where if one person gets credit for an article, the other person doesn't. We're not competing for grades. We're not competing internally like some organizations are set up, that if one person gets something, other person won't get something. We're not really set up that way, but some people have that in their minds, that if they give out too much praise, somehow that is going to affect them negatively. And in fact, we want to be generous even if that was the case, that a generous spirit helps raise civility. And also being trusting, even when there is a risk of being so. Every time we hand off that baton between sales and service and parts, we are doing that with some trust. And at times things don't work out. And then we need to collect ourselves, find a better process, make sure we're properly trained, see if there's a better way of doing it, and then expect everybody to elevate their game, but do it in a way that is civil and creates a civil sense of order from chaos. So civility is really important, and we even see it on hockey teams. So to use a hockey example, lots of hockey teams started in the NHL. Now you see it all the way down to Pee-wee teams. They dress up for a hockey game. Hockey isn't always seen as the most civil sport. Some would call it a barbaric sport. But when you see the NHLers showing up to the dressing room and they're wearing a suit and a tie, some wear a nice top hat, polished shoes, they're trying to elevate the civility. And many hockey teams have adopted now codes of conduct, how they talk to each other, how they settle disputes, because they know that in a dressing room, the civility can sometimes wander very quickly and get rude and crude at the expense of team. And so we see this in some schools that are banning certain, what used to be passage of rights, where they bring on new rookies and they treat them very poorly as some way of making them feel part of a group. That theory from the 60s or 70s and maybe even the 90s, just doesn't seem to be working that well. And teams are starting to say, you know what, if we treat people with respect, maybe that's going to go a longer way than bullying them for a week or two and seeing if we can make them cry. And then if they do cry or don't cry, they're somehow part of us. Hockey teams are saying, listen, that's just not the best way to do things anymore. And they're looking at code of conduct and how they engage with each other, whether they're young or old or adults or minor hockey players. And so we see hockey teams trying to elevate the civility. We also see that when a player would break that, and they constantly break that, even if they're a star player, that can have negative consequences, both for the team, but also for the player. For some of you who follow the Winnipeg Jets, many of you do, you'll know the story of Evander Kane. Evander Kane, very talented hockey player, scores lots of goals, should have been a star on the Winnipeg Jets hockey club, but just didn't get, it seemed from reports, the civility aspect, treating each other with respect. This whole crew concept was lost on Evander Kane, and he did things that disrupted the team. He did things that hurt team bonding, hurt team trust, and apparently one day showed up for the umpteenth time in sweatpants and a shirt when everybody else was showing up in a suit and tie. And some of the players then took it into their own hands, maybe went a little too far, but they just were tired of the disrespect. They were tired of him not following their civil practices, and eventually the management had to trade him. Even though he was a good player, had to trade him, and he hasn't stuck with the team very long because because he's just disruptive in the dressing room, and that doesn't create crew. And without crew, you can't have teamwork, and without teamwork, you don't have success. And so once the Jets removed him, boy, they had one of their most successful seasons ever as a franchise. So this stuff matters. It's not just some hypothetical example. It really has outcomes. So the R is for respect. And respect is pretty simple. It's how we value each other's contributions. And it's having respect and acknowledging that not everybody's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes, but we're going to respect what people do. Everybody plays an important role here. IT plays an important role, sales plays an important role, reception plays an important role, our yard and maintenance staff play really important roles. And we can't be having a different level of respect for a salesperson than somebody who washes the equipment to make sure that it gets out to the customer just like they like it. All of these positions, all of these roles are important and they need respect. And we see that on hockey teams. Hockey teams do not win Stanley Cups by their first line or their second line. It's a long-standing expression that Stanley Cups are won with the third line and fourth lines, because in the playoffs, when it gets very rough and tough, lots of injury, grueling schedules, you need those third and fourth lines. They may not be quite as talented, they may not score quite as many goals, but if a team is going to be successful, those third and fourth lines have to be treated with respect and encouragement and acknowledging they have different levels of skill sets, but they're all very important to what's being done. And so this is very important, and we saw a great example of it just this past season in the Vegas Golden Knights. So here we had a brand new NHL franchise that got all the way from a new franchise with new players, never have been playing together a team, all the way to the Stanley Cup final. The most successful professional sports team in their inaugural season in any sport. And one of the things that the players talked about, and you may have seen it on TV, there was lots of interviews during the playoffs with the players about why were they gelling so well? Why were they overperforming? These were all players that got essentially released from their current teams. They weren't protected. Teams could only protect so and so many players, and they had to leave some unprotected that the new team could draft from. So all of these players now had a common amount of respect. They had felt disrespected by their teams because they weren't protected, but now they shared a common value. They were all had a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They all had to gain respect for each other because their own teams kind of abandoned them, and that rallied them, that gelled them, and they outperformed together. And while they had no stars, they had a lot of good, solid players that when they followed crew, acted civilly, treated each other with respect, had lots of engagement, bought into their system, they had phenomenal success. And I think that's a good example for us as GVE, that we have a range of people, some stronger, some a little weaker, but all of us, every one of us, has got something to contribute. And if the stronger players come in with civility and respect and encourage our players who are newer or not as experienced and encourage them to be their best, then great things are going to happen. And then lastly, from civility and engagement, you get engagement. And civility, respect, and engagement, when they come together, really bond a group of people. So engagement is being present and fully interacting with teammates to build a positive work environment. So when you're engaged in something, you know what that looks like. You know when your kids are engaged in activity, or when you told them they need to do something and they're just going through the motions. And that's us at work. If we're really engaged and not just going through the motions, then we get more crew, which means we get more teamwork. It's understanding that the workplace matters and that we spend a lot of time here, so why don't we get along doing it? Because we'll have more fun. If we have more fun, we'll be more productive and good things will happen. So engagement has a multiplying effect. When we're engaged, each one of us is engaged, we get more output than if we're just each individuals. And this was again the great example of the Golden Knights. No star players, but strong players that were really engaged and outperformed. And so engagement has these multiplying effects for the betterment of our coworkers, for the betterment of our managers, our customers, and then ultimately our company. And if we want to live our vision, then we need more engagement. So crew does not mean, though, it's very important. I'm not saying that we don't hold people accountable or we accept poor performance. or that we avoid accountability. That's not what crew means. Crew means that if we are going to deal with things, the problems that come up, mistakes that are made, we're going to do it in a properly with proper channels. We're going to do it in a civil way. And if you've got concerns about a coworker not performing, making too many mistakes, not living some of our values, then first of all, we discuss those privately, not publicly. We use proper language to do that. We keep our emotions in check, and we talk to managers or HR about it so that we can constructively deal with it. And if through training and other things, the person just isn't making the grade, yeah, then sometimes we have to make changes. But even when we do that as an organization, we're going to try to do that with crew. We're going to try to do it civilly, with respect and engagement, even if we have to part ways. But it can't be something that in the lunchroom you call somebody out or swear at somebody or tell a customer. The worst thing what we can do is to be complaining about a fellow staff member in front of a customer. And you've experienced this. Nothing's more frustrating than when you get a bad meal at a restaurant and you say something to the server and they go, "Oh, that's not my department. I didn't make the food," or our cook isn't very good today, or management never gives me enough staff, so I can't really get to your table in time. You don't accept those excuses. In fact, you go, "That's very unprofessional. I'm really not sure if I'm going to eat here again, because what kind of organization is this when they're throwing each other under the bus?" Right? And so we got to make sure that we don't do that in getting caught up in the emotion either, and that we're always thinking about crew. And crew helps generate that teamwork that we're looking for. But doesn't mean that we can't hold people accountable. So when we get CRE, we get crew, we get a good workplace that we want to be at, a place we enjoy being at, and the like. And so more enjoyment for all staff, more pride in where we work, Green Valley Equipment, and better outcomes for farmers. And when we have better outcomes for farmers, it's better for us. It's better for us in terms of where we work, how we're compensated, and how we grow in the future. So I hope that that helps you with thinking about some tangible ways of being team. And think about crew and talk to your manager about it if you're not feeling that always in your department, and talk to each other about it as well. If something is coming up that is not going right, then say, "Hey, look, how does this fit into crew or teamwork?" The things that we are talking about. And then we will strive to be better here at GVE. So I want to wish you a great month of September. One more month of really putting our shoulder to the grindstone in terms of horsepower and engagement with our customers. Crops are looking better than expected, it seems, across the board. And so we go into this month with lots of optimism. So I wish you well. I look forward to seeing you again.